Welcome to our user group meeting for HomelessData.com for administrators. A couple of you were with us yesterday when we had the project-oriented meeting. And so this is our fourth, I think, user group meeting going over some of the features of Homeless Data and addressing timely issues related to whatever is up next. We have a bunch of different users on the call from different roles and responsibilities. We are a relatively smaller group today, so we hope that there's some opportunity for more discussion and talking through some of the issues. As you all know, we hope HomelessData.com is a platform that brings data together, allows you to create different reports for HUD and to work with that data so we can increase the meaning and relevance of HMIS. So this afternoon, we hope to both keep up and look ahead. So the agenda this morning, we're going to talk about why or why not somebody might want to resubmit last year's system performance measures, quick overview of how to submit the results to HDX, a discussion about how project-level performance might influence system-level performance and what you can do about that, how you can look at that within your region, and that's also timely perhaps for NOFA ranking as well as other activities that you might be conducting within your region. We're also going to talk about a peer-to-peer benchmarking study that we've launched around system performance measures. So jumping right in, as you're thinking about whether or not to resubmit your data for last year to HUD for the system performance measures, some good questions are, were all of the projects included, and was the data quality good or good enough? Did it meet your standards? So if you feel like you got everything and the data was good, then you should be all set with last year. If you know you missed a bunch of projects for whatever reason, maybe data wasn't good, or maybe it was at a different data source or something that you couldn't get to, and you've expanded that list of projects, you should resubmit. On our end, you should be aware that both SPM 5.1 and 5.2, the number reported for those that had been present in shelter for the last 2 years was switched with the number who had not been present for the last 2 years. So you don't need to rerun the report, but at least need to swap out those two numbers for folks that obviously were using our platform for the SPMs. A slight update to SPM 4, which only impacts night-by-night shelters that had open enrollments without an active bed night. If you're using a night-by-night shelter method and an enrollment and you've got an it's a data quality issue, you shouldn't have an open enrollment for somebody that has had no services in a period of time. Any questions about that? Okay, moving along then. So how you do it, FY15 has to be resubmitted before you go ahead and submit this year's, due at the end of the month. They are entered into HDX, and basically you take your reports and then you manually enter the information into HDX. Just to let you all know, we've had some other development updates in the last couple of weeks. We did an overhaul of SPM1, so it makes it run much, much faster over larger data sets, causing some issues for some regions, but that should work out just fine. The import process has also been enhanced, and I don't know if we have anyone from Tarrant County on the call right now, but Tarrant County in Texas had a data set with about 700,000 services. It had errored out after about 4.5 hours, and now it loaded in an hour. So it's not instantaneous, but it's pretty quick, and it shouldn't time out the system or clog it up. And now we're also going to be removing reports automatically after 90 days. We're going to switch in a minute over to homelessdata.com, and we'll be looking at that if we want to talk more specifically about the data that's coming in, going back to 2012, issues that people are having uploading that data, what it should look like, who should be doing it, and we'll get into some of that in just a minute when we go and look at the platform itself. But this is just kind of a quick preview of how system and project performance interact with each other. And several of the system performance measure reports pull on exactly the same data elements as the project performance measures that are measured in the APR. And if you look at the Hearth Act, all of these measures and performance standards are really in black and white in the Hearth Act, and everything that we've been doing up until this point, I think, pushes us towards the goals that are articulated in that law. So for an example, System Performance Measure 1 that looks at the length of homelessness. At the project level, we're going to look at length of participation, and so those are captured in APR questions 22. Measure 2, Returns to Homelessness, looks at those exits to positive destinations, and then a return into a project that serve homeless people, such as emergency shelter. So again, Measure 2 is going to be pulling from the same data that's captured in question 23. Another example, Measure 4, Employment and Income Growth, at the overall system level, at the project level, that can be measured through question 19A. And we'll look at some tools, and specifically some of the work that we did with the City of Detroit to help them understand how the projects were impacting performance. I know, Lisa, we were talking about this yesterday, too. So, as I was just saying, we did did some of this work with Detroit, and folks from the Homeless Action Network of Detroit as well as APP, presented with Matt at the NHSBC conference just a few weeks ago. So we're going to talk about that and what they shared and the dashboard that we created. And then we'll talk about the peer-to-peer benchmarking study as well, and then we can come back and talk about questions and support, other issues that you've got, or questions that you have. So before we leave that part of the webinar this afternoon, are there any questions? Okay. So I want to share with you all real quick before we log in and talk about system performance measures. This is a dashboard that we built that takes national data from what's been submitted to HUD and census data, publicly available information. So we took it for the whole country and created a bunch of different charts and reports. But, so for example, you can click a number of different variables here, values here, and do some comparisons. These are the different measures that we've got for that particular chart. You can, at your leisure, scroll through these charts, select different variables, select different years, and be able to see how your region kind of compares with others, or how your state compares with others. Quite a few variables here. Check out. Now, we've also, this is a place where we are posting, I'm posting the videos and the recordings from these trainings, including from yesterday and others. We have a number of support documents here, resources here, including programming specifications, and other guidance that are kind of go-to documents for everything else that really happens on this platform. So I think everybody on this call is really familiar with the system performance measures as well as homeless data and the reports that we have available and how it's used. One of the things that I really emphasized a lot in yesterday's call, and I want to emphasize with you all too, is the importance of having really clear roles and responsibilities for your region or your organization. Who's responsible for uploading data? Who's responsible for running reports? Who's responsible for looking at that data and making sure that it's accurate? What is the schedule for that? Who's responsible for submitting things to HUD, et cetera, et cetera? We have been emphasizing with you all and with everybody that we encourage the administrators to be uploading data and not so much at the project level. And to really be creating and building a bank of data in the system that's longitudinal and historical that can just be built upon over time. So when you're importing data, to not just import for the particular date range, but to import based on the gaps that are here, whichever your project is. When you open this up, you're going to see the projects that you have access to. Obviously, I'm seeing everything in our system. So you want to look at this screen, you want to see how far the data goes, and you want to upload data to fill that gap. Really the best. And going back, see that this is one day even. If the data is going to 9:30 and then it's 10:01, you actually want to have an overlap of a full day. You might miss services from there. So in talking about the data to import, that would be the approach that we encourage. And Sarah, I know you're on the call. We want to work with you to update those screenshots and what people see, certainly when they're pulling from ETO, so that it's more accurate. Are there any questions about data import and building up that bank of data for SPMs, and not just really for SPMs? It's you know, data quality and data maintenance is not a one-time event. It really should be an ongoing process. These reports are ongoing throughout the whole year, and frankly, if the data is being looked at monthly or quarterly, then reporting season is not going to be a big deal if it's a continuous process. Are there any questions? Call. None of you are muted right now. Like I said, we're a pretty small group. Are there any questions about getting the data in? I don't know. You guys are really quiet today. So that's all right. I'll move on then.
Go
ahead.
So this is Chris from California, Sonoma County. So when we're re-uploading, you know, filling gaps and then subsequently correcting data in our system, and what happens to records that are not addressed in the re-upload? Is everything wiped out and then overwritten by new upload, or does anything linger afterward?
So when you upload, it's a good question because it gets really kind of the heart of the structure of the database. When you upload new data, it updates the records at the project level. So if you've made updates, you can just bring in the fresh data, and it will update the records that are already in the system. And so then when you go to run a report, you have two choices. You can run a report over a particular data import or not. Or you can run a report over a particular organization and project. So you can select this if there's one data source that you want, one data import that you want to pull. But if you've got project data that's coming from multiple imports, you don't need to select that. You can just select the projects and organizations that are relevant for that report. And in fact, we had an issue just today where someone was wondering why Measure 2 was turning out no records when he had run, even though he had data in there going back to October 2012, he was running that report over a particular import that did not include all of that historical data. So there are advantages. There's sometimes when you would use this feature and run it over a particular data set, and there are plenty of times when you wouldn't, and you would just leave that blank and select the projects and organizations that are needed for the report.
And just to add a bit of clarity as far as what we're working around, this is Matt, by the way, on the import and being able to select that import. The one thing that happens when you write to a relational database with all this data coming in is there needs to be a mechanism in place if enrollments get deleted to know that they got deleted so we can remove them from the warehouse as well. In the absence of having that mechanism in place for your vendor, whomever that might be, you can just select a particular import. Now, it's only again, it only affects people that enrollments that get deleted. So things that used to be there that aren't there anymore. But if that's an issue, for your region, let's say you had a significant number of enrollments that had to get deleted for whatever reason, you could always go back into history altogether and start fresh, or you can pick that import ID so you're running just over the freshest import. But if you don't have that issue, I wouldn't choose the import at all. I would just put the report start and end dates, and if you need to pick organizations and projects, go for it. But if you don't, if you need it, like system performance measures, for example, the report selection, it's a regional report, so it should pick everything that's needed based on project type.
So particular projects wouldn't be necessary since the project type is implicit in the data?
You sound like you're speaking in outer space.
Sorry.
No, that wasn't you, Matt. Whoever just spoke.
Yeah, no, I was wondering. Can you say that again?
So picking projects should not be, and it should not be necessary if project type is implicit in the data.
Right. The reports are coded to pull in just the project types that are needed for those projects. So assuming your project types are set up correctly and your project descriptor elements are correct, then if you have a prevention program that's not needed for a report, that report is going to exclude that prevention program anyway. So you don't have to worry about it being included when you run it because the report logic itself will exclude it.
And if you happen to be curious about what project types get included, for example, for the system performance measures, those are all listed in the specifications. And those specifications are on that resources page that Heidi showed earlier.
Yeah. So again, if everything is correct, and if you only have access to data in your region and it's all set up correctly, then you don't have to worry about any of these things. All you would do is select your data source, and it's going to run. And I'll do it over dummy data just so we can have a sense. So I did that over a data source. Now, some of you might not have your own data source, but it would still only give you, see, it just ran. It would still only run that report over the data that you have access to. Does that help?
Thanks.
Okay. So that's kind of all I had to really talk about with homeless data. You guys are all kind of, veteran users of the system. And really, if there are no more questions about system performance measures, then I think we can move on to talk about project performance measures and some of the cool work that was done in Detroit. So we do have on our website the actual PowerPoint from the conference in April, and you can see that there if you'd like. But Matt, do you want to talk through this chart?
Yeah. So, we have had some people trying to run system performance measures at a project level. They'll post reports, and you can do that, but they're limited in what they're telling you because they're really meant for a systemic view of homelessness. So, in order to have a conversation about homelessness in your region, and if you're seeing trends move the wrong way on the system, helpful the next step to be able to say, all right, we're going the wrong way with length of homelessness, for example. How can we impact that and bring it back down to reasonable levels? And we'll have a conversation about reasonable levels, what that means. Second, that's a separate item that we talked about with the peer-to-peer benchmarking study. But for starters, if we want to bring the numbers down, one of the places to focus on is the projects that have the highest utilization. So as you'll see on the left, you have the orange and the green project. What we're doing here is we're taking results of the APRs, and so we're running APRs off of a group of projects, all right, for the same reporting period, and we're taking the CSV output. So now that the APRs have been updated to be able to post those to Sage in a CSV output format.
You guys know what we're talking about there.
So the aggregate results from the report itself, every question, the 65 questions, 5 tables that come out of the APR. You can actually use that data for charts. And so if we were to run APRs over the same date range for projects of the same type, you can then expose those results to tools like Tableau and do something like this. So, and only bringing it up is there are times like we've seen people trying to run, for example, system performance measure, one over a particular project. Well, that's going to tell you the length of homelessness within that project, which is what this is doing. Also, it's only giving you a number. Now, what this is doing of just like average homelessness, what this is doing is helping you to see the buckets, if you will. The project really good about getting people right back in the shelter and then. Okay.
Sorry about that. I was trying to mute some background noise and unfortunately muted everybody.
Okay.
So maybe if folks can keep that background noise limited or mute your own phones, that would be helpful. Sorry, Matt.
So, all right, no worries. So, people are talking, the idea is we're trying to focus on the high performers and low performers in the community. The high performers can hopefully educate the low performers on what they're doing well. The whole idea that it's a community response to homelessness. And you can look at other, different kinds of data. You can look at destinations. This is looking at positive destinations. So there are different destination categories that are considered positive in the APRs, and there's others that are not positive. So by putting them all next to each other, you can get the average percentage of positive destinations per project. And then you look at that line, and if they fall below that line, then they're below average, and if they're above it, they're above average. Now, it's also good to look, maybe the next thing to look at is the returns to homelessness on top of this. Now, returns to homelessness, like measure SPM2, it is a system measure because someone could be in a project and become homeless, but return to homelessness in another project. So that one I would steer clear of trying to use that SPM2 report on a project level. You can do it, but all it's going to tell you is who returned back to that same project. So, just so you know, it's not apples and apples. Like, it's only going to tell you, it's going to filter first, all the records relevant to a project, and then it will show you the people that returned back to that project. But in reality, what the ideal would be, and something we can work toward, is saying, of all the people that left this project, you want to do it at a project level, who returned to homelessness anywhere. And then that could be in your region, or it could be, if it's a warehouse, it's open, it could be to any region. So it's something else to look at. But, other pieces to look at is changes in income over time, data quality as well.
I'm sorry, Matt, this changes in income, again, these are part of SPM4 at the system level. So if you want to look at how the project is contributing, the projects are contributing to that particular measure, I forget which question it is in the APR, but this would be what we would be looking at.
Yeah, I can find that out in a second. Other than an earlier slide you did.
Yeah, I did. I think it's 19 or 20 or whatever it is.
So the idea is, depending on how many projects you have, you might not need to do these data visualizations. And ultimately, over time, we want to be able to support your work and have these in place for you. But, these things do take time and development. So we're really showing proof of concept here with Detroit. But, also informing you that you can use this data. You can go back and look at your APRs. And, maybe you have 5 or 6. Maybe it's not, 400 projects like Detroit has. You don't necessarily need to do data visualization. You can just look at the APR, figure out who's causing the trends to sway up or down. But we'll share a link to this. It's also in the workbook. But we wanted to share this with you to let you know how what we're thinking about here, and maybe kind of give you some ideas of what you can do locally too. This does have potential implications in the future for NOFA rankings as well. So maybe it's not this tab-based approach of different different charts, but it could actually be a scorecard where the community assigns points to certain measures, and ultimately at the end, a score is generated, and projects can be sorted according from the highest score to the lowest, and you either make the cut or you don't. That's the way of the world now. So, if we can support that work and make it so it's an informed decision of who should continue to get funding, who should not, then we're doing our jobs. Any questions on this work? All right. I also think too it's a byproduct of asking people to be muted and then asking to be unmuted. So that's all right. Well, let's move on quickly to the other side about the we talk about is the number high or low. One thing that we're lacking as far as looking at these results, unless we compare to our own to results from the prior year for ourselves, is we don't have any context for whether or not a particular number is high or low. And the reason for that is we're all new to this, and there really hasn't been any information sharing between regions that we're aware of. So to get around this, we've been speaking with a couple people that we're members of the New England Regional HMIS group with. It's called NERMIS up here in New England. And we're conducting a peer-to-peer benchmarking study where we've developed a form to collect the information, similar to how you put it into submit to HUD through HUD HDX, where we're gathering the results, and we'll be doing similar dashboard-style reports to compare regional results, across New England. We don't want to limit to New England, but we're starting off with this exercise because that's kind of the scope of this group. But I wanted to, share this with the group too, to get your thoughts and ideas, and let you know that something else that we're working on, because we understand that oftentimes you'll get questions back from your community stakeholders about the system performance measures, and people want to know what does this mean, and it's kind of hard for if we put ourselves in your shoes to be able to tell them this is a good number, this is a bad number. So we're trying to help facilitate that, and then if we do have high-performing communities, ultimately use the data to help foster conversations between the high performers and the low performers. So there's some knowledge sharing that can happen. So then we can all be high performers, ideally. So that's the scope of the project performance measures and the idea of the benchmarking study. If there are other communities outside of New England that would be interested in participating in something like this, please send an email to support@simtechsolutions.com, support@simtechsolutions.com, and we can see about opening it up. And if you also have any community-specific goals that you need to help flesh out a little bit more that aren't already covered in what we're doing with homeless data, let us know. And we're here to support your work. So if we can do that in any way, let us know. But based on and I think we'll open up for 1 minute for Q&A if anyone wants to unmute. But if not, then I think I'll pause quietly to maybe we get off of this call early and let you go about enjoying your days. So deliberate pause here.
No questions, comments? All right.
All right. Well, if that's the case, thanks for your time. Keep up the good work with everything you do, and we'll look forward to talking to you and supporting your needs in the coming months. Let's get them done for SPMs due May 31st. All right.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.